Hello and welcome back to Climate TV. My name is Eduardo Gonçalves. Today we're going to be talking to Steve Wesley, the founder of the Wesley Group, which is a sustainability venture firm, and formerly the State Controller and Fiscal Officer of the state of California. Steve Wesley, thank you for joining us. First of all, tell us what's been happening in California. There seems to have been an awful lot of innovative legislation there.
Well, first, I was going to joke with you and say if you're interested in states and regional governments, you must go somewhere else. We view ourselves not as a state, but as a nation, the world's eighth largest economy. We have a bigger worldview here in California. But the fact is, California historically has been an area of dreamers and builders, from the gold rush to the silver screen to the Silicon Revolution. And we're pushing things ahead. I think we're a place where the world looks to for innovation, not just in technology, but in ideas in general. And I think California has been a leader in this clean technology and renewable energy revolution. And the good news is that after some false starts and some misses along the way, and some technologies were just perhaps too expensive and not ready for prime time, we're clearly coming in to the era of renewable energy and energy efficiency. And you're seeing it in every industry because these technologies are not only better for the planet, they're now, by and large, the most cost-effective solutions out there.
You've been a speaker and a participant of many climate weeks in New York in the past. Why is it such an important event?
Well, I think it's very important because it's one of the few times in a year where you see most all of the business leaders, the investors, the CEOs of the companies coming together with the governors like Jerry Brown and the major governmental leaders from the planet, all coming together in an informal environment to really talk about best practices. How do we fix the problems before us? So I think Climate Week is a unique opportunity. That's why I've come in the past. I think everybody should be here.
A lot of people say that business has a very important role to play in terms of financing solutions and providing the technological advances which can help us to tackle climate change. What do you think that business can do now at this particular time? And how do you think business can be helped by government in terms of accelerating the adoption of those solutions?
Well, good heavens, you've asked some tough questions there. Look, business in many ways should lead the way, and it has been. It's driving costs down across the board. Let me say something controversial right out of the chutes. When I came out of college 35 years ago, I made a beeline to Washington, D.C. I worked for a bright young president named Jimmy Carter, and I actually worked at the Department of Energy in the Office of Conservation and Solar. And I am proud to have been in the early days of this extraordinary revolution. But having said that, cost of solar back then was almost $100 a kilowatt. It didn't make a lot of financial sense. I'm glad we started. You have to start somewhere. There were very few applications where it made sense, where you couldn't get grid power there otherwise, and you had to just use solar. But by and large, it was way out of the money. But over time, business community, the wheels of the private markets turned. Today, you're seeing the cost of solar go down, down, down 15, 20, 30% a year to the point where we're at roughly $1 a kilowatt. Solar is at a point where it is cost competitive with any other fuel source on the planet, and it's cleaner, and it can be distributed. So this is why the world is moving to solar. As you know, the great majority of all of the power put online every year now in the US and in Western Europe is solar. The same is true, and wind or renewables. The same is true in China. The world is moving that way. It's not just good policy, it is cost effective.
We've got the big climate negotiations happening at the end of the year. What, in your view, can business do to help increase the level of ambition that we get out of those talks? And what do you think businesses actually want to see as the final outcome?
Well, I think a number of things. One, the business community needs to be there front and center. and they need to be standing up for common sense policy changes. We need to be aspirational. We need to continue to move the agenda forward on these issues. But business needs to give government policymakers the assurances they need that we can meet new stretch goals for a cleaner environment. Let me give you just one example. Just today, we have the California legislation session, and there was a Senate Bill 350 where the Speaker was pushing to get California to be 50% reduction in gasoline use by 2030. And as you might guess, the oil industry and others said never, but people pointed out that we get almost half of those savings just by the standard CAFE fuel efficiency standards that are already enacted. And with modest improvements in hybrid vehicles and the competitive market forces that are bringing the cost down of electric cars, there's very little doubt in my mind we will meet those standards with or without legislation. But the private sector needs to stand up, not just the oil industry, but all sectors, and say, here's where the future's going. Let's be a leader, not a follower, especially in California. But you asked another interesting question, and that is, what should government do? And I think the first thing smart government should do is to stop giving subsidies to the carbon fuels industry. These are mature industries. They're by and large quite profitable, but they have huge human costs that are generally not factored into the products in terms of lung diseases, pollution, and so on. And we feel that acutely here because in California, I think 4 of the 5 most polluted cities in the country are right here in our state. So we feel those issues. So the first thing is stop subsidizing industries that are problematic for the health of the nation. Second is the government does have a role to put some to encourage a move to healthier energy sources. And I'm not a big fan of subsidies for solar or electric cars, even though we invest in that space. And I think any subsidies that the government does do should be phased out over time. You don't want subsidies continuing for years and years or decades and decades as they have with coal and oil. Third thing is the government may have a role to play in terms of investing in some new early stage technologies that the private sector might not get to. I know former Secretary of Energy Steve Chu was very good with his Sunshot program to invest in some truly cutting edge technologies, some of which flat out didn't work, and that's expected. Some of which I think are going to lead to big breakthroughs over time. So that R&D phase is probably an appropriate role of government, and it's something I hope our government will continue to do more of. The Chinese are certainly doing their share.
You obviously know quite a lot about the China situation as well. And we've seen some substantial pledges from China in recent months. And indeed, there's been the bilateral announcements between the US and China. What do you think we're likely to see coming out of Beijing in the next few months? And what are the further opportunities for bilateral and even multilateral collaboration?
Yeah, I think the opportunities are huge. And look, China has not just passed the U.S. as the world's greatest polluter. They've galloped by the U.S. And I think China truly was in denial about what the cost would be of this pollution in the 90s and the early 2000s. We all understand why. They were in the industrialization process. A large percentage of their population did not even enjoy the benefits of electricity. We know why they did what they did. But China is in the midst of one of the largest pivots in world history to shift to renewable sources. Plans to produce over 100 gigawatts of wind power. It is a massive effort they're undertaking, so they deserve credit as well. And if you've been to China many times, as I have, the moment you get off the airplane and you look out the window, you really see something that looks like a dystopian environment. For all of the economic progress China has made, the cost and pollution is extraordinary. And you know that government leaders worry about that because huge levels of pollution can lead to social unrest, which no one wants. Here's another fact just to ponder in this whole equation. The Harvard Health Project projects that over 83 million people will die in China alone of lung-related diseases over the next 25 years. Now, That's a combination of many factors, cars, coal plants, maybe smoking. But clearly, China has a major issue to deal with. In the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen some very promising changes. I think Xi Jinping is determined to be a leader in the renewable energy revolution. And I give both Xi Jinping and President Obama great credit when they got together in California, in Palm Springs, to put forward this new common partnership. Because without a doubt, the U.S.-China relationship is the most important bilateral relationship in the world. And if both of these countries can get beyond the finger pointing and can work collaboratively to move more quickly to a cleaner air environment, the better off the planet will be. Here's one last fact that underscores just how important that relationship is. The APA recently put forward data that showed that 25% of the particulate matter, that's a fancy word for smog, off the West Coast comes from Asia. So this isn't just a China problem or an India problem or a Mexico City problem. This is a global problem, and all of us need to get past the finger pointing and get on with the work of coming up with common sense global solutions. That's why I'm so optimistic about the march to Paris.
There have been a number of advances in renewable energy and clean technology in recent years. But where do you see some of the most exciting opportunities coming?
Well, it's a fascinating question. I'm going to say something that's going to surprise you. A decade ago, when our firm started, almost a decade ago, when you said clean tech, you really meant solar, wind, biofuels, and so on. We've moved well past that because we always need to be on the cutting edge, and we're always looking for new technology where there are bigger margins and so on. So we're now much more focused on how to use, for example, data and really the combination of handheld devices, the internet, and what we call big data, and some of these new trends like the sharing economy and the Internet of Things, to reduce people's carbon footprint. So, for example, we've invested in a firm called WaterSmart, which is social behavior software that we sell to utilities and that they push out to all of their users to help them, give them individualized guidance on how to reduce their water footprint. So we're seeing a lot in the software, internet, big data, energy efficiency area. But we're also active and look carefully at things like Uber, because if not everybody has to buy a car, you can just use one whenever you need it, the world's going to be a lot better place. Now, having said that, I don't want to diss solar and wind because those industries are booming. They're growing at about 40 or 50% a year. And I don't know anybody in the pharmaceutical industry or the car industry or any other industry that wouldn't be pretty darn happy with 50% annual growth. And by the way, we expect that growth is going to continue. And what we find so interesting is that investments that just 7, 8, 9 years ago were viewed as speculative, and I think you might even recall a recent presidential debate where one presidential candidate derided the other for having supported a certain solar company. Now, investments in solar farms and wind farms are viewed as the ultimate safe investment where you can get a locked-in 25 or 30-year return at a 6, 7, 8%. Even our biggest pension funds are investing in those. And as you may know, the biggest renewable investor in the country is that wild, radical guy out in Omaha, Nebraska named Warren Buffett. And as far as I know, he's a pretty smart investor.
You as a business leader have always been pretty vocal about the role that businesses should play in the climate challenge. What's your message to other business leaders, in particular, on how they could help to lead the change to a low carbon economy and how they can support the policy process as well?
Well, I would say 3 things. First, you've got to realize we're in the middle of a clean energy revolution. And that's something to be proud of, and you should do it because it's the right thing to do. Second, make no mistake, 30 years ago, when I was at the Carter administration, it was hard to be part of that revolution because a lot of these technologies didn't pencil out. Now they do. And whether it's solar, wind, LED lights, these things are not only good for the planet, they're good economics. But here's the third reason, and it may be the most powerful of all. Every firm needs to be thinking about their brand. We're seeing the emergence of a new generation. I represent the tail end of the baby boomers. We're seeing the biggest buying cohort in the world come along, which are millennials, people who are 18 to 35. And one thing we know about this buying block, they want a smaller carbon footprint. They like clean and green products. This is what the new market wants. And businesses need to know this isn't just good for the planet, it's what customers are demanding. And the fact that it's cost effective to boot, it means get with the program. And we hope that policy leaders are leading this charge, not following it when it comes to Paris. You know, the one thing I would say is there are a lot of people like me working in their offices, and we're working hard, and we're doing the right thing for our investors and hopefully for the planet. But there's a power, a certain power when people come together from all over the world, business leaders, policy leaders, elected officials, and everybody realizes we're on a common mission. And to be honest, it's a common mission where there were a lot of naysayers 10 and 20 years ago. Just like there were when the first doctor stood up and said, hey, we think cigarettes might just cause cancer. The fact is, we're right. The world needs to move towards renewable energy. It's cost effective. It's smart. Customers want it. The time is now. We were right all along. But I think Paris is going to be a magic moment because we've really hit critical mass. There are very few people who can stand up in this day and make the case for continued use of some of these technologies. In fact, I'll share a personal story. When I was in college, I was a student body president, and we argued strenuously for an end of investing our university pension funds in something called apartheid in South Africa. And of course, the trustees had all said we'd lost our mind. And a decade or 15 years later, Nelson Mandela was finally released from jail, and he said, I never would have been released had it not been for the international student and labor movement. So 2 years ago, the students at UC Berkeley reached out to me, and they said, we're really trying to get our pension funds to go beyond coal at the University of California, beyond carbon. And the students told me, the university thinks we're crazy, we're rash, we're just young people, we don't understand. And I said, you're right. Don't give in. Hang in there. Do it a step at a time. See if you can get them to start by not investing in coal. And they called last night and said the university had taken the big step forward, and they will no longer be investing in coal. So it requires some risk. It requires a little bit of a thick skin, but that is what change is all about. And I'm just happy to be part of it and happy to be part of the climate group.
Steve Wesley, thank you very much. I was speaking to Steve Wesley there. Thank you for joining us here at Climate TV. From everyone at the Climate Group, goodbye.